This is the moment we've all been waiting for, the final battle of the epic. A battle not only between Hector and Achilles, but between pity and savagery, God and man, death and eternal glory. Hello and welcome, or welcome back. Today we're reading the great books of Western civilization, beginning with the Iliad. I'm using both the Robert Fagles translation and the Richmond Lattimore translation today. This is book 22. I'm going to start with a brief plot summary, then go into analysis and commentary. While Apollo has Achilles distracted, the Trojan soldiers flee, cramming into the city walls. Hector alone stands outside, fixed to the spot. Apollo reveals his ruse, and Achilles turns from him and runs back towards the gates, towards Hector. King Priam, up on the ramparts, sees Achilles coming, and he and Queen Hecuba try their best to plead with Hector to get him to come within the city to get towards safety and avoid his fate. Hector, however, does not move. He is determined to face Achilles for better or for worse, fearing the shame that would be heaped on him after he went inside the city. He briefly wonders if he should take off his armor to try to reason with Achilles, but decides against it. As Achilles comes closer, Hector loses his courage and begins to flee, running as fast as he can, with Achilles hot in pursuit. 3 times they circle the walls of Troy. Zeus briefly considers saving Hector, but after Athena protests, he sends her down to do as she will to bring about his death. Apollo helps Hector to keep running just fast enough to stay out of reach of Achilles. Zeus raises his golden scales and places within them the fates of Achilles and of Hector. They indicate that it is Hector's day to die. Once the pronouncement of fate has been made by these scales, Apollo leaves Hector. Athena now arrives on the battlefield and appears to Hector disguised as his brother, Deiphobus. As Deiphobus, she claims that she is here to help. Emboldened, Hector turns to face Achilles. Hector offers to make a pact with Achilles before they duel, that the winner may strip the armor of the loser, but must not mutilate the body, and must return the loser's body to his countrymen. Achilles refuses immediately. The battle begins as each fighter throws his spear at the other. Achilles' spear misses, but Athena passes the spear back to him. Hector's spear hits Achilles' shield, but bounces off harmlessly. Hector turns and calls to his brother Deiphobus for a spare, but Athena has now vanished. Hector realizes that the gods have tricked him, and that it is his day to die. He steels himself to die with honor, draws his sword, and charges at Achilles. Achilles braces himself and scans Hector's body, encased in Achilles' own armor, for a weak spot. He finds one at the throat, and as Hector gets close, he spears Hector right there. Achilles makes a short victory speech, gloating over Hector. Hector, whose windpipe was left intact, begs that Achilles not mutilate his body, not leave him to be eaten by the dogs and animals. Achilles refuses. Not for any price King Priam will offer, he says, would he even consider returning Hector's body. With that, Hector prophesies Achilles' own impending death with his final breath, and dies. Achilles reaffirms that he will accept his death whenever it comes. All of the Greek soldiers come forward and each take a turn spearing the body of Hector. Achilles ties Hector's body by the ankles to the back of his chariot, and then rides off back towards the ships and shelters with the rest of the Greek soldiers, intending to go and bury Patroclus at last. Every man, woman, and child within the walls of Troy screams and wails with grief. Priam voices his intent to go and see Achilles to offer some kind of ransom to get the body back. Andromache, Hector's wife, who is within his house, hears all of the wailing and comes outside, fearing the worst. She runs to the top of the walls in time to see her husband dragged behind Achilles' chariot back to the ships. Upon reviving, she begins a long lament, describing all of the pain, discomfort, and even discrimination that will surely be put on her son and her now that Hector is dead. Back in Book 7, when Ajax dueled against Hector, I told you to pay attention to the fact that they thought it was necessary to make a pact with each other, to make sure that, even between mortal enemies, there would be respect and dignity given to the bodies. This tells us that this is normal and acceptable even between people who hate each other. Hector makes the exact same kind of pact here, pretty much word for word, but Achilles refuses outright. He says, "There are no binding oaths between men and lions. Wolves and lambs can enjoy no meeting of the minds. So with you and me, no love between us." This is very different from the duel between Ajax and Hector, as well as the earlier encounter between Achilles and Lycaon. There is no recognition of shared humanity, no recognition of dignity or even acknowledgement that that's something that's important to preserve. He is insisting that he and Hector are as different as predator and prey, and there can be no meeting of the minds, no pacts between them. After he's been mortally injured, though, Hector tries and begs Achilles again. This time, he begs Achilles by his parents. This is another attempt to elicit pity. Maybe Achilles and he are as different as lambs and lions, but surely they can both relate on the level that they both have parents. They both have people who unconditionally love them, that they themselves love. Surely, by that, Achilles can understand that it would be wrong to mutilate him. But Achilles refuses again. Beg no more, begging me by my parents. Ransom? No man alive could keep the dog packs off you. Not if they haul in 10, 20 times that ransom and pile it here before me and promise me fortunes more. No, not even if Priam should offer to weigh out your bulk in gold. Note that Achilles doesn't say anything bad about his own parents in response to this. It's not like he says, my parents, I don't care about them. Why would you even refer to them? No, he's more in astonishment and disgust at Hector's desperation. It's not like appealing to his parents couldn't work. It's just that it didn't this time. For it to work, though, it would take quite the change of heart from Achilles. We see that his hatred has taken an even more disturbing turn than we've seen before. Never mind the dogs or the birds eating Hector's body, Achilles wishes aloud. Would to God my rage, my fury, would drive me now to hack your flesh away and eat you raw. This isn't actually the first time we hear about eating people in the Iliad. The first time was back in Book 4, in a conversation between Zeus and Hera. Zeus says to her, Insatiable Hera, how great are the pains that Priam and Priam's sons have heaped on you, that you rage on, relentless, forever bent on raising Troy. Only if you could breach their gates and devour Priam and Priam's sons and the Trojan armies raw, then you might just cure your rage at last. Bernard Knox comments on these two passages together, saying that because Achilles is using essentially the same words to refer to eating Hector as Zeus is talking about Hera eating the Trojans, that this is how the gods hate, that Achilles is showing his godlikeness by professing his desire to eat Hector. But I disagree. This isn't how the gods ordinarily hate people. We've seen plenty of gods get mad and unleash their wrath on the mortals below, and it hasn't looked like that. Hera does not actually eat Priam. Zeus, to me, appears to be saying this as a way of indicating how somebody can go too far with their anger. He seems almost repulsed by the idea. It's not godlike if the gods are repulsed by it. So if it's not godlike, what is it? Well, I think that by this remark, Achilles indicates that his hatred is more like that of a beast than a man or a god, but for more reasons than you might think. Achilles and Hector, of course, refers to the dogs and the birds and vultures that will come and eat the bodies of the dead, including Hector's own body. But the animals do these things because they're driven by their instincts to do so. Remember, Priam's even afraid that his own dogs will eat him after he's dead. It's instinct. We'll go into this more thoroughly in Aristotle, I think, but animals don't really have free will in the same sense that we do. They do not choose as such in the way that we choose, but instead they get driven, moved to things by their instincts. What does this have to do with Achilles? Well, Achilles is not eating Hector right now, despite the fact that he says that he might or he wants to, because, he says, his rage has yet to drive him to do so. If it did, he would, but it isn't, so he's not. He is emptying himself of his own free will and surrendering himself to his lowest instincts. By this, he's also surrendering the ability to do something even when it's uncomfortable or difficult for him. That is what it means to act like an animal. I'm not saying that he should eat Hector despite the fact that his rage isn't driving him to do it. I'm saying that by using whether he's being driven or not as the criteria for what he's going to do, he's, again, surrendering to his lowest instincts and surrendering a great part of the privilege of being human. Obviously, he's incapable of pity towards another person in this state, and I would argue he's incapable of glory, too. Hector waits for Achilles outside the Scaean gates. His father and mother both beg him to come inside, but he won't. In fact, Homer hints that he can't come inside, that he's shackled to the spot by his fate. Why? Why can't he come in? Arbery provides us with an answer. All of these supplications simply add to Hector's shame. How can he appear before Andromache now, having caused the destruction of his people by refusing Polydamas's advice. If he frightened Astyanax before, in his visit home in Book 6, how much more would he if he came inside wearing Achilles' helmet, the very one worn by the man who killed Andromache's father and brothers? All of this to say that Hector's experience of throwing aside all else for the sake of glory, and in doing so, putting on the Achillean persona, to the point that he looks like Achilles, that has changed him, perhaps permanently, to the point that he no longer belongs in Troy. The loving husband and father from Book 6 is not really here anymore. In light of the fact that Hector looks like Achilles, Arbery makes a few other clarifications to his analysis. The ironies of the pleading are almost too intense, held in place by the armor of Achilles and his past deeds as Achilles. He stands outside, looking like his city's enemy, which he has indeed become through the refusal of Polydamas's advice. He would not be Troy's enemy if he were able to come inside without being shamed. But the very excess, meaning the excess of seeking glory at the expense of all else, the very excess that makes him look like Achilles, makes him unable to come inside. Priam and Hecuba call out to Achilles. They plead with Achilles to come inside the wall, unknowingly pleading for their own destruction. However, despite this dual identity complex that's happening, we do see flashes of Hector's authentic self throughout this chapter. I think that we see an aspect of Hector's true self when he thinks about taking off Achilles' armor and going to reason with the man instead. In those deliberations inside his head, he even considers giving up Helen and all of her treasures, which is something that the dutiful, honorable Hector that we know would have done, given the chance. Bernard Knox believes that we see Hector's true self as he begins his battle with Achilles and as he's throwing his spear. How much lighter the war would be for Trojans then if you, their greatest scourge, were dead and gone. Glenn Arbery, however, believes that we see Hector's true self most clearly after he realizes that Athena has tricked him. This is because that's the moment that the spell of glory-seeking is broken for him. When he realizes that it was all a sham, all a trick, just to bring him to this moment, to his death. He is finally not under the delusion that Zeus has had him under since Book 8. Speaking of which, Hector's death is rich with meaning as well. Just as Patroclus' death foreshadows Hector's death, Hector's foreshadows Achilles' death. What's different this time is that Achilles is aware of this foreshadowing. Achilles has already been told and has accepted that he will die shortly after Hector, and he accepts it again in the moment that he kills him too. For just this quote, I'm going to depart from the Robert Fagles translation and look at the Richmond Lattimore translation. He uses a word there that communicates the gravity of this acknowledgement. Achilles charged, the heart within him loaded with savage fury. In front of his chest the beautiful, elaborate great shield covered him, and with the glittering helm with 4 horns, he nodded. He nodded. The gesture that Zeus uses as an unbreakable vow of assent. Achilles nods his head before looking for the best place to strike at somebody wearing his own armor. That armor that was a wedding gift meant to seal his own mortality. That's the armor that he looks for a weak spot in before stabbing the man who is meant to die just before him. This nod of Achilles is his assent to his own death. Heaping irony onto irony, Achilles attaches Hector to his chariot by piercing him through the Achilles tendon. That's the same injury that Achilles will suffer when he finally dies at the Scaean gates. By this, Hector's death now completely prefigures that of Achilles, and as such, they both receive a share of eternal glory. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, leave a comment, let me know what you liked, what you learned, and as always, if you like what you see here, please subscribe to the channel, because we're going to keep going through the Iliad, and next will be the Odyssey. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.